The morning started like any other Tuesday. People went to work. Children went to school. Coffee shops filled with tired customers. Nobody knew that everything was about to change. At exactly 9:47 a.m. Korean time, the sky went dark over the Pacific Ocean. 3,000 alien warships appeared from nowhere, blocking out the sun. Each ship was bigger than a mountain. Together, they covered the sky like a metal blanket. The Valari Empire had arrived. Fleet Commander Torek stood on the bridge of his command ship and looked down at the small blue planet. He had conquered 17 star systems. He had destroyed civilizations that were 1,000 years more advanced than Earth. This planet, he thought, would take 3 days at most. He ordered his communication officer to send a message to every radio and television on Earth. His face appeared on billions of screens. His voice spoke in every language through his translation device. "People of Earth," he said, his gray face showing no emotion. "I am Fleet Commander Torek of the Valari Empire. Your planet now belongs to us. You have one planetary rotation to surrender. If you refuse, we will destroy your cities one by one until nothing remains. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." He ended the transmission and leaned back in his chair. Now he would wait for the panic. He would wait for the governments to collapse. He would wait for the begging to begin. 11 minutes later, his communication officer looked up with confusion on her face. "Commander, we are receiving a response. Already?" Torek was surprised. Usually it took hours for primitive species to organize any kind of reply. They wished to negotiate surrender? "No, Commander. They are asking us to identify ourselves and submit to inspection. They say we have entered restricted airspace." Torek laughed. His entire bridge crew laughed with him. The idea was ridiculous. Here was the mightiest fleet in the galaxy, and these primitives were treating them like lost tourists. The response came from Colonel Park Do-hyun of the Republic of Korea Space Command. He sat in an underground bunker, surrounded by screens and worried officers. But his voice was calm. His hands were steady. "Unknown vessels, you are in violation of international aerospace regulations," Do-hyun said into his microphone. "Please respond with your identification and purpose. Failure to comply will result in defensive action." His second-in-command whispered to him, "Sir, do you really think they will respond to that?" Do-hyun shook his head. "No, but I wanted to give them a chance. Now we do it the other way." He pressed a button on his console. "All ground batteries, you are cleared to engage. Priority targets are scout vessels. Fire at will." Across the Korean peninsula, massive doors opened in the sides of mountains. Rail cannons that had been built in secret over the past decade pointed toward the sky. These weapons used electromagnetic force to fire metal projectiles at incredible speeds. They had been designed for exactly this moment. 17 Valari scout ships vanished from sensors in the first 3 seconds. The metal projectiles punched through their shields like needles through cloth. The Valari had advanced energy shields, yes, but they had never faced kinetic weapons of this power. Their shields were designed to stop energy beams, not chunks of metal moving at 20 kilometers per second. On the Valari command ship, alarms began to scream. "Commander," the tactical officer shouted, "we have lost 17 scouts. The attacks are coming from the planet's surface." Torek stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Impossible. Our intelligence said they had no space-capable weapons." "They are not space-capable, Commander. They are ground-based kinetic systems. Primitive technology, but extremely effective against our shields." In orbit around Earth, Captain Yoon Ji-woo watched her tactical display light up with enemy targets. She commanded the planet's first orbital defense platform, a station that officially did not exist. It had been built in secret, launched in pieces, assembled by astronauts who had signed agreements to never speak of their work. Jiwoo was 34 years old. She had joined the military because her grandmother had told her stories. Stories about the day when something would come from the stars and humanity would need to be ready. All stations, weapons free, she said quietly into her communicator. The platform's weapons were not as powerful as the ground-based rail cannons, but they had one advantage: position. They were already in orbit, already behind the enemy fleet, already in the perfect spot to cause chaos. Missiles launched. Lasers fired. More Velari ships began to burn. On the surface, people were not panicking. This surprised Tarek more than anything. His psychological models predicted mass hysteria, riots, governments collapsing. Instead, he saw something else on the video feeds his ships intercepted. He saw people forming lines at military recruitment centers. He saw factory workers reporting for emergency shifts. He saw old soldiers putting on uniforms that still fit. He saw children helping their parents load supplies into cars. He saw a species that had been waiting for this moment. What are they doing? Torek asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Why are they not afraid? His science officer studied the data for a long moment before answering. Commander, I believe they have been preparing for this. Not specifically for us, but for something like us. Their entertainment media is full of alien invasion scenarios. Their military has protocols for this exact situation. They have been imagining this day for over a century. Torek felt something he had not felt in a very long time. It was small, just a tiny seed in his stomach. But it was there. It was doubt. Below him, Carl Park Doyun was already on a video call with military leaders from 12 different nations. They had been rivals yesterday. They had pointed weapons at each other for decades. But today, none of that mattered. The American railguns are online, one general reported. Chinese naval assets are moving to defensive positions, another added. Russian nuclear submarines are awaiting orders, a third confirmed. Dohin nodded. Good. Remember, we are not trying to win today. We are trying to survive today. Tomorrow, we fight harder. The next day, harder still. We make them pay for every kilometer, every hour, every life. We show them that Earth is not worth the cost. In the sky above, the Velari fleet began to reorganize. They had expected to terrify a primitive species into submission. They had found something else entirely. They had found humanity. And humanity was just getting started. 6 hours after the first shot was fired, the world changed forever. Every nation on Earth signed the Emergency Unity Protocol. It was a document that had been written in secret 10 years ago, stored in the safes of every major government, waiting for a day that many hoped would never come. The document was simple. When facing extinction, there are no countries. There is only Earth. Old enemies became instant allies. Russia shared targeting data with America. China coordinated with Japan. India worked alongside Pakistan. For the first time in human history, every single military on the planet answered to one unified command. Fleet Commander Torek watched this happen with growing unease. His psychological experts had assured him that human governments would collapse under pressure. They had data from 17 conquered worlds that proved this. Divided species always fell apart when invaded. Always. But humans were not following the pattern. In Seoul, Dr. Kang Mira had not slept in 42 hours. She was an engineer, not a soldier. But right now that did not matter. She stood in a massive warehouse that had been a car factory 3 days ago. Now it was something else entirely. The welds are not strong enough, her assistant said, pointing at the metal seams on the ship they were building. They will break apart under combat stress. Myra wiped sweat from her forehead and looked at the assistant. He was young, maybe 23, and she could see the fear in his eyes. She put her hand on his shoulder. "The worlds do not need to last forever," she said. "They need to last long enough to reach the enemy. That is all." Around her, hundreds of workers were doing the same thing she was doing. They were taking civilian cargo ships and turning them into weapons. They were attaching missiles to fishing boats. They were welding armor plates onto container vessels. It was ugly work, desperate work, but it was work that needed to be done. Outside the warehouse, the streets of Seoul were not empty. Mira had expected panic, chaos, people running for their lives. Instead, she saw lines. Long, organized lines of people waiting to help. An old man who looked about 80 was teaching a group of teenagers how to clean and load rifles. He had survived the Korean War 70 years ago, and now his knowledge was needed again. His hand shook slightly, but his voice was strong. "You aim here," he told them, pointing at the weapon. "You breathe slowly. You squeeze, not pull. And you never, ever give up." A middle school student, a girl no older than 13, was organizing medical supplies with efficiency that would impress any nurse. When asked why she was not at home with her family, she simply said, "This is how I help my family. This is how I help everyone." Aboard the Valari command ship, Tarek received report after report. None of them made sense. "The humans are not evacuating their cities," his intelligence officer said. "They are reinforcing them. Their factories are not shutting down," another officer added. "They are increasing production. They have converted automobile plants to weapons manufacturing in less than 6 hours. Their population is not hiding," a third officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. "They are volunteering. Millions of them. They are lining up to fight us." Torek slammed his fist on his console. "That is impossible. No species behaves this way. When faced with superior force, populations always fragment. They always prioritize individual survival. This is basic psychology." His science officer spoke quietly. "Commander, I have been studying their broadcast signals. Their social media, their news, their communications. I think I understand what is happening." "Then explain it." The science officer took a deep breath. "They are acting as a single organism. But they are not a hive mind. They are individuals who have chosen to work together. They have a concept they call, I believe the translation is humanity. It is not just a species name. It is an identity, a shared purpose. When we attacked Earth, we did not attack a collection of nations. We attacked their home. And they are responding as one family." Lieutenant Han Sung-ho climbed into the cockpit of his fighter jet and strapped himself in. The jet was old. It should have been retired 5 years ago. But today, it would fly one more mission. Around him, 29 other pilots were doing the same thing. Some were active military. Some had retired years ago. One was a commercial airline pilot who had not flown a combat mission in 15 years. But they were all here, already. "Listen carefully," Sung-ho said into his radio. "Our target is the enemy carrier group in Sector 7. We will not have support. We will not have rescue. Most of us will not come back." Silence on the radio. Then a voice spoke. It was young, probably a pilot fresh out of training. "Sir, why are we doing this? We cannot win against their technology." Sung-ho smiled, though no one could see it. "We are not trying to win. We are trying to hurt them. Every ship we damage, every resource they spend on us, that is one less ship and one less resource they can use against our families. My grandfather grew rice on land that his grandfather cleared by hand. That land is behind us now. I will not be the first man in my family to die protecting it. And I will not be the last." The jets launched. 30 small aircraft flying toward 300 enemy warships. It was suicide by any logical measure. 22 jets were destroyed before they reached their targets. 22 pilots died in balls of fire and twisted metal. But 8 jets got through. 8 pilots delivered their weapons. 8 explosions bloomed on the hulls of Volari carriers. It was not a victory, but it was a message. On the ground, people watched the battle in the sky. They saw the tiny jets flying toward the massive alien ships. They saw most of them die. They saw a few succeed. And instead of losing hope, they found more of it. Because if 30 pilots could hurt the enemy, then what could 30 million people do? What could 300 million do? What could 8 billion people, working together, fighting together, dying together, accomplish? The Volari had invaded Earth, expecting to conquer a primitive species. They had awakened something far more dangerous. They had awakened humanity's will to survive. And that will was just beginning to show its true strength. The thing that truly broke the Volari's understanding of humanity was not the weapons. It was the internet. In 72 hours, human beings had done something that should have taken decades. They had captured fragments of Volari communications from destroyed ships. They had uploaded these fragments to the internet. And then, millions of people around the world had worked together to decode them. Linguists in universities shared their theories online. Amateur code breakers worked through the night in their bedrooms. A retired mathematics professor in Bizan figured out the basic grammar structure. A teenager in Brazil identified the number system. A factory worker in Germany recognized patterns in the sound frequencies. By the end of the 3rd day, humanity had a working translation of the Volari language. By the end of the 4th day, they had cracked the basic encryption of Volari military communications. By the end of the 5th day, they had reverse-engineered the fundamental principles of Volari shield technology. Sergeant Choi Yerim sat in a basement in Seoul, surrounded by computer screens and empty coffee cups. She was 19 years old. 6 months ago, she had been planning to quit the military and go to university. Now she was leading a team of the best hackers on Earth. Her team was unusual. 3 of them were military cyber specialists from Korea. 2 were American intelligence agents who had been enemies last week. 1 was a Russian hacker who was still technically wanted by Interpol. Another was a Japanese programmer who had never worked for any government in his life. None of that mattered now. Their encryption is a joke, Yerim muttered as her fingers flew across the keyboard. It is like they never imagined anyone would try to break it. The Russian hacker, a thin man with tired eyes who called himself Ghost, laughed softly. Why would they? They have conquered 17 star systems. Nobody has ever fought back successfully. Why build strong locks when nobody has ever tried to pick them? Yerim nodded and kept working. Her screens showed streams of intercepted Volari communications, troop movements, supply schedules, commander names, weakness reports, all of it flowing through her systems like water through a net. She found something interesting and flagged it for the command center. Their shields have a refresh cycle, she announced. Every 0.3 seconds, there is a tiny gap. If we time our weapons correctly, we can hit them during that gap. This information was shared with every military unit on Earth within 10 minutes. On the Yellow Sea, Commander Baek Junho stood on the deck of a fishing boat. He was 51 years old, a career naval officer who had spent his life preparing for conventional war. Now he was commanding the most unconventional fleet in human history. They called it the Mosquito Fleet. Thousands of small civilian vessels filled the sea around him. Fishing boats, pleasure yachts, cargo barges, rubber dinghies, anything that could float and carry a weapon. Each one was piloted by volunteers who knew they would probably not survive. The big alien ships cannot target us all, Junho explained to his captains through the radio. We are too small, too many, too fast. Their weapons are designed to destroy military vessels, not fishing boats. We are not trying to defeat their fleet today. We are trying to bleed them. Every torpedo we fire, every missile we launch, every explosive we deliver, that is damage they must repair. Resources they must spend. Time they must waste. A young woman's voice came through the radio. She was piloting a speedboat armed with homemade explosives. "Commander, I have a clear path to the enemy support ship. Requesting permission to engage." Jun-ho closed his eyes for a moment. She was 24 years old. He had met her yesterday. She had been a university student studying marine biology. Now she was a soldier. "Permission granted," he said. "Good luck." "Thank you, Commander. Tell my mother I was brave." Her boat accelerated toward the alien ship. Valari point defense weapons fired at her, missing again and again because she was too small and too fast. She got within 50 meters of the enemy hull before they finally hit her. The explosion took out a significant portion of the alien ship's sensor array. Stories like hers were happening all over the world. In every ocean, on every continent, ordinary people were becoming extraordinary. A truck driver in America drove a vehicle loaded with explosives into an alien landing zone. A grandmother in Japan used her fishing boat to ram an alien scout craft. 3 brothers in Africa distracted enemy troops long enough for their village to evacuate. Each sacrifice was small, but together they were enormous. Fleet Commander Torek sat in his command chair and stared at the reports on his screen. He had stopped being angry days ago. Now he was simply confused. "They are using fishing boats as weapons," his tactical officer reported. "They are strapping explosives to personal watercraft. They are attacking our ships with wooden vessels." "It is madness," Torek said. "No, Commander. It is strategy. They have calculated that we cannot stop all of them. They are trading lives for damage. And they have billions of lives to trade." Torek felt that seed of doubt in his stomach grow larger. He had conquered species with advanced technology. He had defeated enemies with powerful militaries. But he had never faced an enemy that used consumer drones as guided missiles. He had never fought a civilization that turned surfboards into explosive delivery systems. He had never encountered a species that crowdsourced military intelligence. He sent a message to Valari High Command requesting reinforcements. The response came back within the hour. "Request denied. It is one planet, one primitive civilization. Handle it yourself." Torek read the message 3 times. Then he looked out the window at the blue planet below, at the millions of tiny lights that represented human cities still burning with defiance. They did not understand. High Command did not understand. Nobody in the Empire understood. This was not one planet fighting. This was 8 billion individuals, connected by invisible networks, sharing information at the speed of light, learning and adapting faster than any single mind could imagine. And they were getting better every single day. The Battle of the Pacific Trench lasted 19 hours. It would be remembered as the moment everything changed. Rear Admiral Ominji stood in the command center of the submarine Rox Dokdo. Deep beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, she was 47 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and calm eyes that never showed fear. Around her, officers from 6 different nations worked together at their stations. She had 73 submarines under her command. Korean, American, Chinese, Russian, Japanese, British, French. A week ago, some of these nations had been pointing nuclear weapons at each other. Now they shared the same tactical network, the same mission, the same enemy. The Valari are launching landing craft, her sensor officer reported. 300 vessels descending toward the ocean surface. Minji nodded slowly. The aliens wanted to establish beachheads on the coastlines. They wanted to begin the ground invasion that would finally break human resistance. They believed that space superiority meant automatic victory. They had forgotten one thing. Humans had been fighting in 3 dimensions for more than a century. The ocean was not the sky, but it was close enough. And the ocean belonged to humanity. All submarines, begin Operation Deep Silence, Minji ordered into her communicator. Execute Attack Pattern 7. The Valari landing craft descended through the atmosphere and hit the water. Their pilots were confident. Their intelligence had told them that human naval forces were primitive, easily avoided, easily destroyed. Then the ocean floor exploded. Mines that had been planted weeks ago, hidden in the deep trenches, detonated in perfect sequence. The water became a wall of fire and pressure. Alien craft that survived the initial blast found themselves surrounded by submarines rising from the darkness like metal sharks. Lieutenant Shin Yoonji was the navigator on a submarine that should have been retired 2 years ago. The vessel creaked with every depth change. Half the system showed warning lights. But today, it was hunting. Torpedo away, the weapons officer announced. Yoonji watched her screen as the torpedo tracked toward an alien landing craft. The enemy ship tried to evade, but it was designed for space, not water. It moved wrong, turned wrong, thought wrong. The torpedo hit its underside and cracked it open like an egg. We grew up on stories about this, Yoonji said quietly to herself. We always knew how it was supposed to end. On the surface, the Valari ground forces that survived the ocean landing found no relief. Every beach was fortified. Every coastal city had been turned into a fortress. And the people defending those cities were not just soldiers. Staff Sergeant Entayo led a squad through the ruins of Bizin. 6 days of constant fighting had reduced his squad from 12 members to 4. They were running low on ammunition, low on food, low on everything except determination. An alien patrol appeared at the end of the street. Taiho held up his hand, signaling his team to stop and hide behind the rubble. We cannot win a straight fight, he whispered to his soldiers. 3 of you go around the left side. I will make noise here and draw their attention. When they focus on me, hit them from behind. A young private, barely 20 years old, grabbed Taiho's arm. Sergeant, that is a suicide mission. Taiho smiled, though there was no happiness in it. Private, every mission in this war is a suicide mission. The only question is how many of them we take with us. He stood up before anyone could argue and started firing at the alien patrol. His rifle was almost empty, but the aliens did not know that. They turned toward him, their weapons charging with that high-pitched whine that had become the sound of nightmares. Then his 3 soldiers hit them from behind. 2 aliens fell. The third spun around, confused, and Taiho used his last bullet to end its confusion permanently. Stories like this were happening in every occupied city. The Valari ground commander sent increasingly desperate reports to Fleet Commander Torek in orbit. They do not retreat. Even when we surround them, they keep fighting. Their wounded soldiers keep shooting until they are dead. Their civilians attack us with kitchen knives and garden tools. We captured a hospital yesterday, and the doctors fought us with surgical instruments. What manner of species is this? Torek had no answer. On day 12, something remarkable happened. Human engineers, working with stolen Valari technology and their own desperate ingenuity, completed the first human-built energy shield. It was crude. It flickered. It could only protect a small area. But it worked. Dr. Kang Mira watched the first test from behind reinforced glass. When the enemy weapon fired at the shield and failed to penetrate, she did not cheer. She simply nodded and said, "Good. Now build 1,000 more." By day 14, the tide had turned. Not because humanity was winning, but because the Valari were no longer winning either. Their advances had stopped. Their supply lines were constantly attacked. Their soldiers were exhausted from fighting an enemy that never ever gave up. Fleet Commander Torek called a meeting with his senior officers. They gathered around the holographic display of Earth, a planet that had seemed so easy to conquer 2 weeks ago. "We have lost 1,200 ships," Torek said. "Our ground forces report 40% casualties. Supply vessels are being attacked before they reach the surface. And the humans are getting stronger every day. Yesterday, they could not penetrate our shields. Today they can. What will they be able to do tomorrow?" His officers had no answer. Torek looked at the blue planet one last time. He thought about his orders, his duty, his honor. Then he thought about the reports from the surface. About soldiers who fought with broken bodies. About children who threw rocks at armored troops. About old people who walked into enemy formations with explosives strapped to their chests. He made his decision. "All ships," he announced over the fleet-wide channel, "prepare for withdrawal. We are leaving Earth." The bridge fell silent. Withdrawal was not a word the Valari used often. It was not a concept their empire understood. But Torek understood something his empire did not. He understood that some victories cost more than defeat. And this planet, this small blue world filled with 8 billion stubborn, creative, impossible creatures, was not worth the price. The Valari fleet turned away from Earth and began its long journey home. Behind them, humanity watched and waited and prepared for what would come next. Captain Yunji-woo watched the alien fleet turn and run. She stood on the bridge of her orbital defense platform, surrounded by the exhausted survivors of 2 weeks of constant battle. Half her crew was dead. Most of her weapons were destroyed. The station itself was held together by emergency repairs and desperate hope. But they were alive, and the enemy was leaving. "They are retreating," her tactical officer said, his voice filled with disbelief. "All ships are moving toward the edge of the solar system." Ji-woo did not celebrate. She knew what this meant. The aliens were not defeated. They were going home to tell others what had happened. They were going to warn the rest of the galaxy about Earth. "Track them until they are gone," she ordered. "And then start repairs. This is not over. This is just the beginning." Fleet Commander Torek sat alone in his quarters during the long journey back to Valari space. He was writing a report, the most important document of his career. It would be sent to the High Council, shared across the Empire, studied by military academies for generations to come. He wrote slowly, choosing each word with care. "I, Fleet Commander Torek of the 3rd Imperial Fleet, submit this report regarding the attempted conquest of the planet designated Earth, third world of the Sol System. The mission has failed. I arrived at Earth with 3,000 warships, a force that has conquered 17 star systems without defeat. I left with 1,800. The conquest was expected to take 3 planetary rotations. It took 14, and we achieved nothing permanent. I did not fail because of enemy technology. Human weapons are primitive compared to ours. I did not fail because of enemy numbers. Their military forces were small compared to our invasion fleet. I failed because the species called humanity does not behave according to any known psychological model. When we attacked, they did not panic. They organized. Nations that had been enemies for centuries became allies within hours. They shared resources, information, and lives without hesitation. They functioned as a single organism with billions of minds, but they were not a hive mind. They were individuals who chose to work together. This should be impossible, but I witnessed it myself. They learned our language in 3 days. They cracked our military encryption in 4. They reverse-engineered our shield technology in 5. By day 10, they were building weapons we had never seen before. They improved measurably, observably, with every hour of combat. Their soldiers fought until death rather than surrender. Their civilians joined the battle without being asked. Their children threw rocks at our troops. Their elderly carried explosives into our formations. We captured a medical facility, and the doctors attacked us with surgical tools. We took a school, and the teachers defended it with furniture and fire. Most critically, they were prepared for us. Not specifically for the Velari Empire, but conceptually for alien invasion. They have imagined this scenario for generations. They have written stories about it, created simulations of it, developed strategies for it. When we arrived, we were not a surprise. We were something they had been waiting for their entire existence as a species. My recommendation is simple. Earth is not to be conquered. Earth is not to be approached. Earth is to be left alone. If any officer of the Empire doubts this assessment, I invite them to attempt what I could not. But I offer this warning. They are watching now. They are learning. They are building. The fleet that comes to Earth next will not face the primitive species we encountered. It will face something far more dangerous. It will face humans who have tasted alien blood and found it to their liking. They are a species that spent their entire history fighting themselves, building better weapons to kill each other, learning how to survive in the worst conditions imaginable. We thought this made them weak and divided. We were wrong. It made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. This report is my final act as fleet commander. I take full responsibility for the failure of this mission. But I do not take responsibility for underestimating an enemy that no intelligence could have predicted. Earth stands. Humanity endures. May the Empire be wise enough to leave them alone. Torek finished writing and sent the report. Then he sat back and waited for judgment. The report spread across the Velari Empire like fire. It was read by generals and common soldiers. It was discussed in council chambers and drinking halls. It became the most viewed document in galactic history. Some called Torek a coward. Some called him wise. But nobody volunteered for the next Earth invasion. Nobody suggested trying again. The blue planet in the Sol system became the most famous unconquered world in the galaxy. 10 years later, Director Kanmira stood at the viewing window of Earth Defense Station Alpha. The station was enormous. Humanity's first permanent military installation in orbit. Built with a combination of human engineering and reverse-engineered alien technology. Beside her stood Admiral Park Doyen. His hair was gray now, and his face carried the weight of a decade of preparation. He had been a colonel when the invasion began. Now he commanded the entire Earth Defense Force. "They will come back," he said quietly. "Someone will test us." "I know," Myra replied. "That is why we are here." Behind them, the station hummed with activity. Thousands of personnel worked at their stations, the best humanity had to offer. And beyond the station, visible through the window, floated the fleet. Earth's Vate. Ships built from stolen technology and human creativity. Ships crewed by the children of those who had fought in the First Contact War. "Do you think we are ready?" Doyun asked. Myra smiled. "We were born ready. That was the point. We spent our whole history fighting each other, building better weapons, learning how to survive against impossible odds. The galaxy spent thousands of years conquering easy targets. They forgot what it means to face a true predator." She turned away from the window and looked at the Admiral. "We did not forget. We never forgot. And now we are coming for them." Somewhere out in the galaxy, alien civilizations looked at their star maps and saw a small yellow sun with a small blue planet. They saw a warning marker that had been placed there by the Velari Empire. The warning was simple. 4 words that would define galactic politics for centuries to come. Do not touch Earth. But humanity was not content to simply wait. They were not content to simply defend. They had tasted victory against superior technology. They had proven that courage and determination could defeat advanced weapons. Now they were building ships that could travel to other stars. Now they were training crews to operate them. Now they were planning expeditions to the worlds that had sent the Volari against them. The galaxy had taught humanity one lesson during the invasion. It had taught them that they were not alone in the universe. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson in return. They were about to teach them that some sleeping giants should never be awakened. And Earth was finally awake.